Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinabadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Sutram. Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darsitam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Ajnana timirandhasya jnanam janashalakaya chakshu militam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Stavaram Jangamam Vyaptam, Yatkim Chissacharacharam, Tatpadam Darsitam Yena, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapiyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darsitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Amadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. We're doing Atmabodha and we are at the slokas 23 and 24 where the discussion is in terms of what is the nature of Atma and what is the nature of the world. So this Raga, Ichcha, Sukha, Dukkha, it's on I think. Raga, Ichcha, Sukha, Dukkhadi, Raga, Ichcha, Sukha, Dukkhadi, Buddhau Satyam Pravartate, Sushuptau Nasti Tannasi, Tasmat Buddhistu Natmanaha. So in the sloka it says, 33, says this properties of raga, ichcha, the likes and dislikes, and sukha, dukkham, all these dvandvas, the pairs of opposites, sitam, vishnam, sukham, dukkham, manam, upmanam, sitoshna, sukha, dukkheshu. So this is in the Bhagavad Gita also, they belong to buddhi, they belong to the mind, and because when the mind is there, they are feeling, these are expressing, and when the mind is not there in sushuptau nasti tannasi tasmat buddhistu na atmanaha. Since when you go to deep sleep state, all these likes and dislikes and everything else is dissolved or absorbed into the mind which itself is folded. So therefore they are not there in the deep sleep state. Everybody sleeps comfortably. There is no the Advaita in the deep sleep state. It's only the Advaitic state only, and therefore that way the Atma is still there because I am still there. I slept well, and I say because I was there to sleep well. Therefore they do not belong to me, but they belong to Buddhi because Buddhi is mind. When the mind is awake in the waking state or a dream state, all these express itself, ragams, Ichcha, Sukham, Dukkham, Apamanam, all those things are expressed. Therefore, by what you call Anvaya Vyatireka logic, because one is, the other is, and you have a situation where one is still there but other is not. I am still there, but all those things are not there, as in the deep sleep state. So by process of elimination, I can discover that I am there independent of them. They do not belong to me. They belong to the buddhi only. And what is my nature? She is prakasho arkasyato yasya, prakasho arkasyato yasya, saityam agni yatoshnata, svabhava sachirananda, nitya nirmalamatmanaha. This is nature of me, myself, or the self that I am, is sachidanandam, sat Chit Anandam. It is pure, of the nature of existence, consciousness, and limitless. And that is called Satchidananda. It is Nityam, Nirmalam. It is eternal and Nirmalam. It is without any thing other than itself. Mala is something, dirt, which is something other than myself, is what is called dirt. And therefore, since it is infiniteness, there cannot be anything other than Brahman. Therefore, it is pure. And these are not, Satchit, Ananda are not attributes of Atma. They are not qualities of Atma. They are Swabhavaha. Swabhava is their intrinsic nature. So we need to understand what is Swabhava Lakshana, where is Tatastha Lakshana. And there are Lakshanas, is essentially the attributes of an object, where Tatastha Lakshana is incidental attributes, and incidental attributes do not belong to it. And simple example is the house where, that is the John's house, or that is Devadatta's house, where the crow is sitting right now. So because all houses are looking alike, now I can differentiate Devadatta's house by pointing out there is a crow sitting there, and that is John's house. So crow sitting on John's house is only a tatastha lakshanam, an incidental qualification. Not wherever the crow sits, that's not John's house or Devadatta's house. It's only tatastha lakshanam. And Brahman is defined in the Upanishad both using tatastha lakshanam and swarupa lakshanam. Janmad Jasya Yataha, in the Brahma Sutra, Brahman is defined. It is that who is the source of the origin for the creation, or creation, sustenance, and annihilation. So the Brahman is defined by using there a Tatastha Lakshanam. Intrinsic nature of Brahman is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma. That is where it's provided in the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is same as Satchidananda Swarupam. And these are the intrinsic nature. So we have an intrinsic qualification, and there is a tatastha lakshanam, incidental qualification. But even in the intrinsic qualifications, swarupa is different from just an attribute. For example, if I say sugar is sweet, that is a swabhavam of the sugar. Sweetness is the swabhava of the sugar, but for it to be a swarupa lakshanam, a converse has to work. In the mathematically, it says converse means if it is a sweet, it has to be sugar. That means anything, if it is sweet, there cannot be anything other than sugar. Then only it is what do you call swarupam. But we know that if something is sweet, it need not be sugar. Now we have so many things that are sweet, which are like equal and all that, NutraSweet, aspartame or something. So therefore we have objects which are sweet but not sugar. So sweetness of the sugar, it has to be sweet for it to be sugar, but if it is sweet, it need not be sugar. So the converse doesn't work. Therefore, it is not a swarupa lakshanam, although it is swabhava lakshanam. Swabhava means its nature is to be sweet. So we have in the tradition, Satchidananda is not only swabhavam or swabhavika lakshanam, it is swarupa lakshanam that Shankaracharya gives exhaustive analysis in the Taittiriya Upanishad when it says Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Why it is Swarupa Lakshanam? Because it is Anantatvad, because it is infiniteness. And infinite cannot have any qualities. So whatever you say is only its nature itself. Even the statement infinite is not a statement, it's not a finite. And that's how we define this Satchit Ananda. It is not non-existence, it is not unconscious entity, and it is not a limited entity. Therefore it is Satchit Ananda Swarupam. And scripture uses a converse statement like Prajnanam Brahma. It doesn't say Brahman is conscious entity, it says consciousness is Brahman. That means wherever there is a consciousness, it has to be Brahman and it has to be limitless. And therefore wherever existence is there, Sat is there, it has to be Brahman. Existence may be expressed in different forms, but the nature of existence is Brahman. And that's what Krishna says in the Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavihi, Brahmajnyo, Brahmana Udam. In the sloka, says when it says the Arpanam, the ladle is Brahman. How can the ladle be Brahman? Just now we have defined Brahman is conscious entity and ladle is not conscious entity. So their ladle is Brahman because it is Sat Swarupam. Existence is there. That existence is expressed in the form of a finite ladle, inert ladle. And that is the nature of the Brahman. The existent part is the Brahman. Consciousness is not expressing in the ladle because the equipments of the ladle, upadhi of the ladle, are not conducive to express the consciousness. So only Brahman expresses as pure existence. So this has to be understood clearly. So therefore, my nature is, Svabhavaha, is Satchidanandam, which is Nityam Nirmalam, that Atmanaha. I am that Satchidananda Swarupam. It is my nature. And we will analyze later, how do I realize myself, later a little bit. But here we are going to address a little bit more how, or at least Shankara is going to address a little bit how knowledge takes place in this sloka 28. Atmana Satchidamshascha Buddhi Vrittiriti Dvayam Samyojya cha vivekena Janamiti pravartate together. Atmana Satchidam Sascha Buddhi Vrittiriti Dvayam Samyojya cha vivekena Janamiti pravartate. Here he is addressing in a very condensed form epistemological issue of how knowledge takes place. And we'll try to summarize it as best as we can, because there is a text by name Vedanta Paribhasha by Dharmaraja Advarendra. I think it's around 15th century, and he has written how does the knowledge takes place according to the Advaitic tradition. And we have it in our website in the Advaita forum.org, a critical analysis of Vedanta Paribhasha, which I have done, and one can look at more exhaustive analysis of this. But here, in a condensed form, Shankara provides it here. Atmanaha Satchidamshascha Buddhehe Vrittihi iti dvayam Samyojya avivekena Janami iti pravartate. So here we have all these things of Vedanta is summarized in this sloka. Atmanaha Satchit Amshaha Ascha. So nature of self is of the nature of, just now we analyze, it is Satchidananda is Swabhava. So it is of the nature of existence, and Amshascha, it is that part of it, and it is also consciousness, Atma being a conscious entity and existent entity. And Buddhi he Vritti. Buddhi consists of Vritti. Vritti means thought process. So we have two things here. In any knowledge, I have to have a Buddhi instrument for knowledge to take place. When there is no buddhi, I cannot know things, even though my nature is of pure knowledge, as I am nature of jnanam. But for knowledge to take place, knowledge of objects, we have to be careful. Knowledge is knowledge of X and Y. So for knowledge of an object to take place, I need an instrument for knowledge. A pramana. Instrument is pramana. So buddhi here, the mind acts as a means of knowledge, and process has to occur. And when I perceive an object out there, the object out there is as though transformed into a thought in the mind. So how does the perception takes place? According to Vedanta, according to at least Advaita Vedanta, I'm sure it's according to the Mimamsa also, where the mind goes out and envelops the object, and along with the senses, mind is going. The senses grasp the attributes of the object, and that forms a vritti, a thought in the mind. According to science, the information brought into through the equipment, through the eyes, and forms the retina, forms an image, and that through the optical nervous system is translated into the electrical signal, and that will is translated into, codified into a thought process, which we have no idea how it does. But ultimately, the end product, in either according to Vedanta or science, is a thought is formed in the mind. Here, buddhihi, vrittihi. The nature of the mind itself is the vrittihi, or the thoughts. So every object out there, as though transformed into a vritti, a thought in the mind. So existence of the object out there has as though translated into existence of a thought, and the contents of the thought are nothing but the attributes of the object, the image of the object, the form, the colors, and sabda, sparsa, rupa, rasa, gandha. All those 5 sense attributes are gathered, and they are the essentially contents of the vritti. So we have 2 things. One is buddhi, which consists of vritti, and atma is the self that I am, which is of the nature of pure satchid ananda swarupam, satchid ananda swarupam. And now, for the knowledge to take place, these 2 have to be joined together. Samyojya. Samyojya means joining together. What are the 2 things that are joining? One is the Atma. Atma is pure consciousness, and another is the Buddhi, and in the form of a vritti, in the form of a thought. And Buddhi and supported by the consciousness is Samyojya. So how exactly this Samyojya is taking place? So here one has to be careful. Atma, pure Atma, is all-pervading, is infinite. So it cannot have Samyojya Sambandha or Samyoga Sambandha, cannot have it, because it cannot join anything. Joining involves 2 things. 2 separate things. I can join one the other. But whereas Atma being already infinite, I cannot add to it anything or join something else into it. So therefore, joining has to be understood also clearly. Samyojya means here the Atma is joining with the vritti of Buddhi. This dvayam, there are 2. One is the consciousness, another is the existence, or joining together for the knowledge to take place. That is the essence of the statement. How is consciousness joining with the existence? The consciousness is all-pervading, and it gets reflected in the mind or the buddhi, and when it gets reflected, that becomes a reflected consciousness, or reflected the chidabhasa, reflected the consciousness in the buddhi. So buddhi itself becomes a bright when it reflects, just as the moon is reflecting the sunlight, and moon does not have the luminosity of its own, but in the presence of sun, when the sunlight falls on the moon, when it gets reflected, we say the moon is shining there. So the shiningness of the moon is not its intrinsic nature, but it's coming from the sun. In the same way, the buddhi instrument is reflecting the light of consciousness, and the reflected light now joins with the existence of the object in the form of a vritti. Together is called samyojya. So let's look at and analyze clearly. All pervading consciousness, and that gets reflected in the buddhi, and the reflected light from the buddhi falls on the thought, and therefore the light of consciousness that is coming from the atma getting reflected by the buddhi falling on the vritti. So vritti is a thought, and the consciousness is joining together. These are the two things here: consciousness and existence expressed as vritti are together joining. That's what is called samyojya. And when the consciousness falls on the thought, it gets reflected again back onto the mind, and therefore mind says, I have the knowledge, because it's not a normal light, it is the light of consciousness. So when the light of consciousness falling on the brain, on the buddhi, getting reflected, and the reflected light, which is called chidabhasa, falls on the thought and then further reflected back to the mind, then mind has knowledge of the thought. So that's what is essentially involved in the perceptual process, which is being exhaustively analyzed in the Vedanta Paribhasha. It is also being analyzed in the Panchadasi, as we are studying now. So in this process, dvayam, there are two things have to be joined for the knowledge to take place. One is the existence, which is of an object which is inert. So Brahman expressing as the existence of the object in the form of a name and a form, because the vritti contains information about the object, that is called attributes, expressed as a form. Form stands for all the attributes. Attributes is a form, forms and colors and tastes and so on and so forth. And existence of the Brahman is expressing itself in the form, or in that form, and when I know, I give a name for it, so it becomes a nama and a rupa for the object. So object out there as though transformed into a thought in my mind, and a thought in my mind which is called vritti is being recognized and known through the consciousness, which is the light of consciousness falling on the buddhi, getting reflected by the buddhi, falling on the vritti, getting reflected back to the mind, and that is the knowledge, and that's what is involved, called samyojya. So here everything is packed in this statement. Atmanaha satchidamsasya, see satchidananda, satchit aspect of it, of Atma, and buddhihi vrittihi, and buddhi in the form of a thought process. Iti dvayam, these two are joining. So buddhi, by intrinsic nature of buddhi, is inert, but it becomes conscious entity as though due to the reflected consciousness called chidabhasa. And these two are joining, the light of consciousness getting through reflected by the mind and falling on that is joining with the existence of the object expressed as vritti in the buddhi, together samyojya, and that becomes a knowledge. So atmana satchidamsasya buddhihi vrittihi iti dvayam samyojya. Cha avivekena janami iti pravartate. So knowledge takes place as long as consciousness, which is always there, and the buddhi is there functioning. That means it's not folded as in the deep sleep state. So it is functioning in the waking state and the dream state. And as long as this buddhi is there, there is always reflection that will going to happen. And the reflected light will fall if there is a thought process that are going on. And thought will reflect back that consciousness, and that becomes a knowledge. So in this process, the knowledge of the existence of the object expressed as the vritti in the mind takes place. But here a third factor arises In this, that itself is, yes, this is a pot, this is a table, this is a room. All this knowledge of this can take place, and that knowledge of this called idam vritti. Idam is stand for anything objectifiable object. But another thought spontaneously raises in the mind, and I know this is a part, I know this is a thought, I know. So knowledge of the existence and or the consciousness of thought automatically takes place in the mind. But owning that thought, owning that knowledge of that I know, becomes due to the aviveka. Aviveka means due to lack of knowledge of what is real, what is not real. That is the viveka. So here, the adhyasa is also error of superimposition also being pointed out here. Even though this combination, samyojya, is taking place routinely in every perception of an object, that means consciousness of the subject and existence of the object together joining for me to be conscious of the existence of the object, and which is expressed as the thought in the mind. This occurs as long as consciousness is there, as long as buddhi is functioning. But what happens is, when the knowledge of that takes place, there is an ownership of that knowledge arises also, that I know, I am the knower, janami, I know this is a table, this is, I see a table, I know it is a table. So how do you know? I know it. So there is a claim of knowership or is there, and that is due to the aviveka. Now, who is this knower? Janami iti pravartade. He functions as I know. So who is that knower? Is it pure consciousness or is it buddhi? So this is what has to be understood clearly. Pure consciousness has nothing to do with it. Pure consciousness is all-pervading consciousness, Satchit Swarupam. It is infinite. If you ask pure consciousness, why are you doing it? I say, I have nothing to do. I am just shining because that's my nature. So it's self-shining. It is Swayam Jyoti. Jyotir Jyoti Swayam Jyoti. It is always shining of the nature. Because its nature is itself is consciousness itself. God Prajnanam Brahma. So Atma itself has nothing to do with it. So where is the knowledge and what is the knowledge process and who says that I know has to be also clearly understood here. In the process of when it reflects in the buddhi, then the buddhi is becoming as though active, as though it is a conscious entity, just as the moon is becoming as though it is a luminous entity in the sky, even though it does not have any luminosity. So buddhi is by itself is inert, but it becomes active Chaitanya Swarupam by borrowed consciousness, you can say, or reflected consciousness. It itself also has a capacity to reflect, and the capacity to reflect depending upon how pure the buddhi is. If it is a dull mirror or a polished mirror, the reflection will be different. Even though light is the same that is falling, depending upon the medium of reflection, we can have the different types of reflections. If therefore the buddhi can be either pure buddhi, in that case it's called the purity. When it is completely pure, it shines all the light that is falling on it. Whereas if it is not pure enough, then it's not bright enough to reflect all the light that is falling in it. Therefore, the knowledge that can take place is also not a bright knowledge. If it is polished, then immediately all the light of consciousness falling on the vritti, and vritti also can be known. If the vritti is not agitated, which it is, it's a pure itself, it reflects back, means it's a clear thought, then there is no problem. Knowledge of the object takes place clearly also. But there is another factor, a factor that is raising as janami. Janami means I am the knower of this. So that ownership is called ahankara. Ahankara is I am the owner. So that ownership arises, a fictitious quantity arises in the reflection. The reflection, just as when I go in front of the mirror and I cannot see my face, so I need a mirror. So when I look at the mirror, I see my image there, and looking at the image, and if there is a problem in the image, then I adjust it if I know that it is not a problem in the reflecting medium, but it is problem coming from the original. So if there is a black dot in that, and if I move and the black dot also moves, then I know it is coming from my face. So I had to adjust the face. It's not that I had to polish the image, I had to polish my face in order to remove the black dot. But if the image itself thinks I am the owner, I am the original, then there is a problem. That is what is called aviveka. Aviveka is not knowing what is my real nature and what is my false nature. What is the real face and what is the image face. And that has to be understood. That's what is called nitya, anitya, vastu viveka. There are two things always. I am and this, and in this is ego. I am this is the essence of ahankara. I am this means I am, this is this buddhi or this mind or this body or this intellect. So identifying with the inert entity is the nature of this original ego, ahankara. So in this there are two things, I am and this, all together, joined together, samyojya, and forming as a entity as ahankara, and who claims that this is my knowledge, I know this and I don't know that. So when I say I know this, obviously there are other things I don't know. So my knowledge is I want to know that. So the nature is to, so I need to know more because I want to be infinite knowledge I should have. So I go after knowledge with the notion that I am only a limited knowing entity. So janami iti pravartade. That concept of that, the ahankara arises, and that is what is called a jiva. Jiva is here, according to Advaita, is identification with the upadhi as I am this, where this starts with the buddhi itself. Buddhi knows due to the reflection process, but the knowledge in the buddhi is claimed as my knowledge because it is instrument of knowledge, and I know this, I don't know this, etc. is what one behaves, because identifying I am with local buddhi, local equipment that is reflecting, is the ego or ahankara that arises because of not knowing my true nature. So here the whole epistemology is packed in two lines, and the error of superimposition that I am the ego ahankara, that I am the one who is a knower, is also being pointed out, and that is due to aviveka, because I have no knowledge of what is really real and what is really false. So let's take 626. Shankara is packing so much in each sloka. The more we analyze, the more one can extract the information. But we need to finish it also. And we will now take sloka 26. Atmano vikriya nasti, Atmano vikriya nasti, buddhe bodho na jatvati, buddhe bodho na jatviti, jiva sarvamalang nyatva, jiva sarvamalang nyatva, jnata drashteti muhyati, jnata drashteti muhyati. Together. Atmano vikriya nasti, buddhe bodho na jatvati, jiva sarvamalang nyatva, jnata drashteti muhyati. So atmanaha vikriya nasti. So here this is what we discussed in terms of these two aspects, the pure consciousness and the instrument buddhi, and a third factor, the image that is coming in. All these are being pointed out here. So Atmanaha Vikriya Nasti, the all-pervading consciousness which is Satchidananda Swarupam, has no activities at all. Vikriya is all the capacity to experience. Says action is not there. So action, reaction is I am a seer, I am seeing, I am doing. All this kartrutva bhava is not there from the Atma. Why? Atma is, first, number one, it is conscious entity and it is infinite entity. Infinite entity cannot do any action, because action itself involves a modification. Because now I have acted, so I am qualified by having done that action. Whereas Atma cannot be qualified because it is infinite. Therefore, Atmanaha Vikriya Nasti. Therefore, self cannot do. So one has to be careful, because if you look at some of the scriptures and teachings, it says self is a teacher. So you have to be careful. Self does not teach, because Atmanaha Vikriya Nasti. It cannot teach. So self cannot be a teacher. And so statements of what is self-teacher? Self, through the body, through the buddhi, has to teach only in the process. So one has to be very careful in the interpretation or misinterpretation that self is the ultimate teacher. So here it's a very categorically says Vikriya Nasti. In the self there is no activities of any kind, because it is being infinite. Buddhi bodho na jatvati. When it comes to buddhi, buddhi is nothing but intellect, the discriminative intellect, and manas is the doting mind, and all are included here. Buddhi, antahkaranam. So bodho na jatvati. It cannot know by itself. Why? Because it is inert. Inert thing cannot know. Pure consciousness need not know. Why? It is infinite. It is pure knowledge itself. It cannot have knowledge of, because knowledge of means something other than itself. There cannot be anything other than itself. Therefore, Atma cannot have knowledge of XYZ, and Buddhi by nature is inert. Inert things cannot know. So there is one Einstein's brain is there. So if Einstein's brain is so intelligent, so if you won't ask what is 2 plus 2, it won't answer it, because it is inert. The consciousness has to be there to illuminate. So buddhi bodho na jatvati. By nature, the buddhi cannot know. So then who is the knower? Knower is a fictitious entity, Atma, getting reflected in the buddhi, called Chidabhasa, and Chidabhasa, not knowing that I am the light of consciousness getting reflected here, thinks I am the mind itself. So it is the notion in the Chidabhasa that arises in the buddhi itself, and that is called Jivaha. Jivaha sarvam alam jnatva jnata drashteti muhyati. So jivaha, an individual, so sarvam alam, having known little bit of each one, having the knowledge of in his transactions through the buddhi. So buddhi can know whatever it is through the pramanas that it encounter. It knows only so much only. So jnata drashteti muhyati. So identifying with the buddhi, I say I know only this much. Who is the I? I am the conscious entity. Everybody says, nobody says I am unconscious entity. Everybody says I am a conscious entity, but identifying buddhi, I am knowing this much. I don't know that much. And therefore, alam jnatva, having little bit knowing, jnata drashteti muhyati. I am the knower, I am the seer, I am the transactor, I am the perceiver. All these day-to-day transactions that I am doing it, with the notion that I am a doer, is a fictitious entity coming between Atma and inert buddhi. A third factor is coming here, and the third factor is the jiva notion. A notion is due to the misunderstanding that I am pure consciousness. So what is involved now? Pure consciousness is there, inert buddhi is there. Now these two are together as it is, but this buddhi has the capacity to reflect. Therefore, a third factor is coming. This there, my face is there and a mirror is there. Now a third factor is coming. My image is formed, if there is a shining nature, if this image is formed due to the mirror. So having a mirror in front of me automatically makes it that there is an image immediately forms. So a third factor which resembles my face and reflects by the mirror. The more number of the mirror, then there will be a lot more images that are forming. Even though I am only one, if the reflecting media are many, the reflections are many, and each reflection depends upon the reflecting medium or the quality of the medium or the purity of the medium or cleanness of the mirrors. So depending on that, there are varieties and varieties of reflections. If the reflection doesn't occur, it's not the fault of my face, it's not the fault of lack of light on my face, it is the fault of the medium. Medium has no capacity to reflect. It may be a black body, so it doesn't reflect at all. So therefore, reflection depends upon the medium and nothing to do with the original Atma. Original Atma is all the time pure, all-pervading reality. Now, when the reflection occurs, there is a third factor, the image is formed. Image, as we said, depends on the reflecting medium. Now, the image itself thinks that, not knowing that I am the original face getting reflected, thinks that I am the original image, consciousness, due to this mirror. And therefore, this is me, or this is I, is being formed. That is called a jiva. A notion. So here we define correctly, a jiva is a notion arising in the buddhi due to the reflection of the consciousness by the buddhi when it identifies that I am the buddhi. Follow it again. Jiva is a notion arising in the buddhi when the light of consciousness falling on the buddhi, and when it reflected and the reflected consciousness takes itself, I am this medium that is getting reflected. I am the buddhi, and then I am the mind, I am manas, and I am the deha, I am the body. This be my identification. The identification that I am this, I am this, I am this is the jiva, and that is the true, that is the image that is forming. And where is it occurring? It is occurring not in the Atma, pure consciousness, it is occurring in the buddhi. So where is the misunderstanding? Misunderstanding is arising in the buddhi only. So the lack of knowledge is occurring at the buddhi level. And where is the knowledge has to take place? Knowledge has to take place using that buddhi, same buddhi, where this misunderstanding is. And by knowing proper means of knowledge, a pramana is required, and Vedanta provides that pramana, and through that pramana, buddhi has to know that I am only a reflecting medium, and the Chidabhasa that is getting reflected is coming from the original consciousness, and that is my real nature, because when I say I am conscious entity, and therefore even the buddhi I know, I am the knower of buddhi also, and I am pure knowing principle of the light of reflection, because of which all these processes are occurring. That knowledge has to take place in the buddhi only, because the confusion is in the buddhi, and therefore the buddhi is required for self-realization. It's not the absence of the mind. People say mind has to go, we have to go beyond the mind. If you go beyond the mind, you go to sleep, because the buddhi is folded only in the deep sleep state. The knowledge cannot occur unless the buddhi has to know. Buddhi can know only through process, because the understanding is also through the misunderstanding is also a process. Confusion is also due to process. Therefore, only process has to eliminate and clarify, and when it occurs, when the buddhi becomes clear, then it can see the truth as the truth. So all this is involved. So jivaha sarvam alam jnatva, having known everything little by little, little through the pramanas, pratyaksha, anumana, all those modes of knowledge has to take place for knowledge of every object. So having known, jnata drashteti mukhyati, I am the knower and I am the enjoyer. This kind of notions arises in the buddhi. So that's why ahankara is also part of the buddhi. When the buddhi is folded in the deep sleep state, there is no ahankara also arising in the deep sleep state. All I say is, I slept very well. And that I do not know what is there is also a statement that is made only after being awakened from the deep sleep state. Because even knowledge of the ignorance of myself, I do not have it in the deep sleep state. That occurs only when I am awakened and say, I did not know, I slept very well, I have no knowledge of space, time, everything, but I was happy. So because there is no Advaita. So Advaita comes also with the buddhi only. Understanding therefore involves, clearly points out, that using the buddhi, using the Advaita, I have to understand I am Advaita. And this, that is the reason why it is very subtle, because in the I am, this identification of conscious entity and unconscious entity together or mingled so intensely as one, and I had to use a proper viveka to discriminate what is real and what is not real in this combination, and identify myself with the reality, since that is nature of consciousness. Unreality is of the nature of inertness, and that is called Atma Anatma Vichara, and Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka is required. Is going to address more in this examples. Rajjus sarpavadatmanam jivam jnatva bhayam bahet jivam jnatva bhayam bahet naham jiva paratmeti jnatasche nirbhayo bhavet together. Rajjus sarpavadatmanam jivam jnatva bhayam bahet naham jiva paratmeti jnatasche nirbhayo bhavet. So here, so what is the purpose or what's the utility of knowing this? Why should I know this? Is always a question that people ask. So here is the Shankara's answer to it. Rajjus sarpavadat. So why should I know it is a rope? Because I am taking the rope as a snake, and that itself is not a problem, but I am afraid of the snake. So, number one, a notion of not having the clear understanding of what it is. That's called non-apprehension of the reality. And that causes a misapprehension in the mind, that I take non-apprehension of the rope, it is there. I get a misapprehension that it is a snake. So that itself will not stop, will not be sufficient, will not be enough. Because it is a snake and I am afraid of the snake, I am afraid of the bhayam bhavati. Therefore, fear arises. So, jivam jnatva bhayam bhavet. So, rajjus sarpavadat atmanam jivam jnatva bhayam bhavet. Atmanam, in the same way, all-pervading consciousness, taking myself, I am only this local entity as a jiva, having that knowledge only, then I am afraid. Just as I am taking something other than myself, I am afraid of that what I take. Just as I am taking the snake which is really not the snake, but it is really rope, I am taking as it is something other than what it is there, and that what I am taking is limited, and it causes a fear, and therefore bhayam bhahet, therefore it causes the fear. So what is the cause for fear? In the case of Rajju Sarpam, it is the snake that I am projecting. So in the projection of the snake, where the rope is, there are common sadrishyam. Sadrishyam is there are commonalities. I am not projecting an elephant there, I am projecting only a snake. And that snake is what I know causes me fear. So I have a knowledge in my previous samskara that snake is what I should be afraid of. My security is a problem. So even though the snake is projected there where the rope is, and there is really no snake there, what is there is only rope, but that notion that it is snake can cause other problems, because if I have blood pressure, my breathing is gone, and I am trying to run away from the snake, all other secondary activities are arising because of the wrong understanding that it is a snake rather than a rope. So not only the misunderstanding is a problem, and misunderstanding janita, says ajnana janita, karyam also is there, that I am a doer, I am an enjoyer. All these notions arises as a secondary because of the lack of knowledge that I am pure Satchidananda Swarupam. So Atmanam Jivam Jnatva Bhayam Bhahet. This Atma, all-pervading consciousness, taking itself, I am the reflected medium here. So all-pervading Brahman. Why all-pervading? Because there is nothing other than Brahman. So Brahman himself is getting reflected, and the reflection is in the medium, and the reflecting light of consciousness is taken as the original one. So how does it occur? This is exactly how it occurs is what is explained in the dream state. How does the dream occur? When I go to sleep, a waking mind projects itself a dream world. I enter as though as a local jiva, and identifying myself. Who is the myself? Conscious entity that I am, who is sleeping there on the bed. Now identifying myself with the local entity, which is a jiva, as a dreamer inside my dream, identifying I am only this, and the world is different from me, and therefore I am afraid of the tiger that is chasing me in my dream. So this bhayam comes because of apparent duality that is projected there because of the ignorance of myself. I am the really waker, sleeping in an air-conditioned room comfortably, and I am not in the forest. There are no tigers anywhere. In spite of that, I take that as a real, and that's where the bhayam, the fear comes into. So fear comes because of the misunderstanding that what I see is really what it is I see, not the essence. And that is the problem. So, naham jivaha paratmeti jnatva ched nirbhayo bhaved. So, when does this fear will go away? Fear will go away only when I recognize I am not this local entity, the body, mind, intellect. Body, mind, intellect are inert. I am not an inert entity. I am a conscious entity. Identifying myself, I am a conscious entity, and all these are only equipments that I am using, but I am not the equipments because they are my equipments. I am different from the equipments, and realizing I am the consciousness itself that is all pervading, and that na aham jivaha, I am not the jiva, para atmeti, I am the absolute. If I realize that, jnataschet nirbhayo bhavet, then there will not be any fear. So what's the advantage of knowing this? There will not be any samsara. And that means it becomes a sport then, because sport is you enjoy. Whether you win or lose, you enjoy. The life becomes a sport only when I realize the truth. Otherwise, I take mistaken notions that will be there that will bother me. I take myself, I am a local entity, and the local entity, the body, mind and intellect are limited, and I don't like the limitations of the body, mind, intellect. Therefore, I suffer the consequence of the limitations of the mind and intellect, and they are born and they decay and so on and so forth, and their problems become my problems, and that's what the bhayam is. And the bhayam is when I have identified myself, I am the all-pervading. Therefore, the bhayam, the fear comes from the second. And that's why in a deep sleep state, no one is afraid. There, everybody is comfortably sleeping with the happiness, because Ditya Advaya Bhayam Bhavati. Upanishad says, any speck of difference, Udaram Antaram Kurte Adatasya Bhayam Bhavati. A speck of difference can cause the bhayam, fear. Whereas in Advaita, understanding, there cannot be fear because it is all myself only. Okay. Let's do one more chant, 28. Atma vabhasayatyeko, Atma vabhasayatyeko, buddhyadinindriyanyapi, buddhyadinindriyanyapi, deepo gatadivat swatma, deepo gatadivat swatma. Jadaistainavabhasyate, Jadaistainavabhasyate. Together. Atma vabhasayatyeko, buddhyadinindriyanyapi, deepo gatadivasvatma, Jadaistainavabhasyate. So, Atma avabhasayati ekaha. So, Atma. So here I am trying to differentiate. How do I know what is my nature? My nature is I am a conscious entity. So I am self-shining. I illuminate everything, including I illumine the darkness. When I go to pitch dark room, I say it is dark. I cannot see anything. But why it is not? I cannot see anything? Because it's too dark. How do you know it's too dark? I can see what? I can see that I cannot see anything else, because I say I am seeing the darkness everywhere. So in what light I am seeing the darkness? In the light of my consciousness, because I am conscious entity that illumines the darkness and illumines the light also. So it's called Jyotir Jyotihi, and that is the avabhasayati. That is self-shining Atma. It is Ekaha. There is only one. There are not many Atmas. There is only one self-shining Satchidananda Swarupa Atma. And Buddhyadi Indriyanyapi Deepo Gatadivas Swatma Jada Taihi Jadaihi Na avabhasyate. Whereas if you take the buddhi and indriyanyapi, all the sense organs are inert by nature. Jadaihi, Taihi Na avabhasyate. Therefore they do not shine by itself. They are not self-shining, they are not self-luminous. I have to illumine them for them to be known. So only through the process of illumination I am able to have the knowledge of buddhi, indriyas, etc. Whereas I am pure consciousness. So even when the buddhi and indriyas all are folded, I still am. That is what in the deep sleep state, I am self-shining entity, shining the absence of everything else in the deep sleep state. I say there is nothing is there, because no object is illumined there. I am self-shining entity. The object and the subject, both duality arises only with the buddhi, but no duality in the pure Atma, and Atma is of the nature of pure consciousness, and that consciousness is the existent consciousness, not a non-existent consciousness. So it is Sat Swarupam and Chit Swarupam, and it is Ekaha. It is Ananda Swarupam. It is infinite, and there is unlimited, and limitless is Anantatvameva Anandaha. Limitless is happiness, since any limitation causes unhappiness. So that is Atma Avabhasati. So that is the nature of myself, and I am illuminating everything. Deepo Gatadivato. Just as if I put the lamp inside the pot, and if there are holes in the pot, and the light shines through the pot, and through the holes the light passes through everywhere else also, and through that light I can see the world also. So this analogy is used to explain that Deepam is like an equipment, inert thing, but it has become illuminating thing because there is a light of consciousness there. So whereas in the case of Atma, which is all-pervading consciousness, is lighting through the reflecting process, the bimba pratibimbam. So reflecting process, it is lighted, the buddhi is lighted, and just as the pot is lighted through the light, and that is through the indriyas and all that, all the activities will go on, but original light is coming from myself. I am that Atma, I am the pure light of consciousness, I am the pure existence, and I am Ekaha, I am Ananda Swarupam. And this has to be analyzed by using a discriminative intellect of what is my real nature and what is my false nature, and that has to be understood. So with that, we will stop here. We'll do Purnamada, Purnamidam. Om Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha.